Uh, Let me try and do what we did yesterday. Although it's a bit tricky since we're projecting, but we'll try and have it slightly larger. Okay, so I think that'll be a bit better, and we can start building from what we did yesterday. So if you remember yesterday, we said we've got the include files, include stdio.h, include stdlib.h. We've got our global variable, which was int, our void menu, our void create, our void edit, with our structure for our values. We have our main, where all we get is a menu. We had our menu options, which was create, edit, update, delete, search, etc. So we had not actually done more of the elements that we have. For example, let me just open what we had yesterday. Yes, we had name of property, name of tenant, date of occupation, rental agreed, deposit charged, outstanding balance. These are some of the variables we're supposed to work with. So maybe today we can just add them and we proceed to add some more content to our create. So the next element was date of occupation, rental agreed, deposit charge. So to do that, we can put a character, uh, date, let's try and create something that makes sense. DOO, that would make. No, I don't think that would make sense. Let's find, so we can call it date O, so that we know that is date of occupation. Then we label that as date of occupation, like that. We need another one, which is what was the next thing that comes next? Rental. Okay, we can just put it as rental as well, so that we know that that's the rental agreed, and this is the date of occupation. Rental agreed. What was the next one? I think there's one more. The deposit charged. Okay, this was put in the wrong spot. And then the last one is character deposit. Okay, we can also put it as deposit charge. So this one we won't need to put a comment because already it's the full content that we've got. So we need date of occupation, rental, and deposit charged. We can go down to our function, which was void create, and we need to then add the remainder of our options. Okay, so we can run this and put the variables that we need in place of uh, the elements that we want. So the next one is date of occupation. So if we put a period, it's not a comma. So that's date of rental agreed. We also put a period. Then that's the rental. Deposits charged. A dot. Deposit charged. Outstanding balance. Out. Wow. We just put it as that. That's what we want to put it as. So we just need to go back to our structure and place the outstanding balance. So character, and then we make it 20. Outstanding balance, like that. Okay. So since we've got these elements, this then means at this particular point, we've got all our variables as they come. So we might need to have a bit of some content that we explain. We said our structure is just a single value that contains a number of variables. So these variables will be actually referencing what is in our structure. But this is not the end of our create element or our create property. We then need to also add something that will then create our file. That's number one. Number two, we also then need to be able to state that after creating what happens. And then, so we might need to restructure this code and have a loop, right? We have a loop that we can be able to run through. Okay. To do that, we will also need to implement another property. Okay. We want to be able to say when the person gets to the create function, they are then told you want to create a new value or do you want to return to the main menu? So in other words, we are creating a sub menu within our create function. That's what we want to work with. And then from there, we also want to be able to create a file. Hopefully our time will allow us to do that during this lesson. So to do that now, we are just going to edit from line 59 and we recreate this in the format of a menu or a sub menu. Okay, so we then do the following: printf, and with our printf, we want to do the exactly this. Please make your selection. Okay, so your selection is now based on the options that are there or the options that you want to put for the individual. Okay, as it stands, we can also create local variables. So we can create a variable that will then say is int c, which is our choice, and then we've got a printf. Would want to be able to, number one, create a value. So as you can see, printf is quite effective because we use it in a number of options. We also have another printf where we want to return to menu. Okay, like that. So we've got two options. We've got either create a value or return to main. And then this is then done using our C. Okay, so we need the scanf to be able to get our data, and that will be our C. So we're just adding to what is currently there. Okay, so we've got our percentage D, we add to our C, and then we want to then put how this will be working. Okay, so let's also add a different control statement so that we see how we can work with our control statement. Our control statements pretty much help us to control how our project will be running, or what our project will be doing whilst we're doing whatever it is that we want to do. Okay, and this is the effort that you are supposed to then put whilst you are applying the things you would have learned in your video. So would want to be able to say the moment we select, we want to be able to give either you return to the menu or you create a document. So we can simply say if, and then if then gets our C equals 1, and if our C equals 2, like that. We then put our curly brackets so that we know what each if statement is doing. Okay, and then we want to copy this. And put it in our C equals 1. And then if it's equal to 2, we then want to go back to our menu, which in this case is RUS create, like that. So in other words, we would have done an option of selecting our options. Though at this particular point, we might have a problem because when we're working with inputs for a string and inputs for an integer, chances are you might have a problem with your compiler. So when you're running it, you might face problems. So since my computer is still not working, I won't be able to test, but whilst you're testing, you can test and see if it's giving us the proper results that we want, and if there are any missing elements from our particular code. Are there any questions so far? Yes. The last part where I copied and pasted. Okay. So the last part that I did for cutting and pasting was I just copied this code, which was the printf name of property. We get a scanf that follows that, and everything else that followed. It was not within the if statement. So I just copied it and put it in the if statement in C equals 1. That's all I did. Yes. Mhm. Okay. Um, Very good question. But it now depends on how you are structured. If you remember, I said to doing this, I need you to take note of what you do. You can have an integer, you can have a character, but you also need to depend on what is your reason for putting an integer or a reason for putting a character. So for the purposes of the example, I'm just giving you what you're supposed to do. You as the student are the one who's going to work on why you want a character or why you want a date. So it would make sense to actually have it as a date, because a date is the date that someone takes into that particular agreement. So in other words, as we're working with it, you are the one who then works with the director. So now it's easier because I'm giving you a guideline to say, this is how your variables should be, this is what you put in for your variables, this is how your output should be. So your date of occupation to have, it might need to be a. It also might need to be a based on what the date. And also the format of the date makes your inputs and outputs a little bit easier. Okay. Are there any other questions before we proceed? The next part might take us some time, but I want us to do it and get results as soon as we can, so that we can round up. I also do your video, I upload it, and you guys can be able to work on something. I don't know, are there any other questions? Yes. Yeah, that's where I'm going. Yes. When we start the structure, okay, so one other thing you need to take note of whilst you're working on this code, make sure you've got your syntax in order. So where there is a comma, make sure it's a comma. Where there is a semicolon, make sure it's a semicolon. Where there is a period, make sure it's a period. Where there is an underscore, make sure it's an underscore. And also refer to the previous video so that it makes a difference. It is not impossible, but it is time consuming. But I believe you guys will. Okay, are there any other questions before we proceed? The next bit, yes. Right, I think for the purposes of progress, and then I'm going to give you this document, I'm also going to give you, I think if you're left behind, but take note of where you might have been left behind and proceed with us. I will still give you a copy of the video. If the internet improves, I want to show you how to download videos, and but the video for you I've got, so you can you might as well also come and get it. I don't really trust people's flashes, which is why I was putting it on YouTube. So I think it's easier if you can be able to download it. But I'll try to make an exception because my computer already is complaining and I don't want to add to its problem. Okay, so I'm going to go into one other element that is also in the video that we might need to add to this particular step, right? We want to work with files. So files are pretty much records that we want to then store about your particular element. If you remember, one of the first things that we discussed was the phone record. So the form record on your phone pretty much works in the same format or in the same category as your file, whereby we're saying create a text file which is in XML format where you put all the records that you want to have as part of the document. In other words, we then say these various options that you can work with for your text file. The easiest text file that we can work with is a .txt, which is your normal text file for your computer. But that's not the only type of file that we can work with, and there are various files that we can work with until we get to what we want to get to. So let's have the content that we need to add to our file so that it does the saving that we want. So for our files, we do the following. We need to work with the keyword called file, and then we need to put a file pointer, which in most cases you might find it's usually regarded as FP. Okay, so our FP makes our file. Okay, from there we then want to be able to use our FP in a constructive manner. How do we then do that? We use our FP, which is a reference to a pointer, and we say is equal to F open, and F open gets our file and what we want to do to our file. And then we can use F close to close our file on it. So that is the process that we now need to work with. First of all, we create a file and then we give it a file pointer, which we said is FP. FP we then say is equal to F open, which helps us to open our file. And then F close closes our file so that we have a record of whatever it is that we want to have and close it after writing. The next thing comes where we've got this function called fopen, and fopen pretty much works like this. We then want to create a file. So we want to say rental record, right? So we then save it as txt. Maybe let's actually leave it as just rental and remove the record because rental record sounds a bit off. Okay, so the first part would want to direct our file to a file that we will save. So we call it rental.txt, and then we put a comma, and then we put our quotations again. We want to open the file for writing, and then we want to put whatever that we want to put for our specific file. Okay, this then means at this particular point we've got our file. If it does not exist, we want to create it, and when we create it, we want to add information to our specific file. So to add something to our file, we can do the following. We just have our printf, we open and we close brackets, and this is a function that takes our file pointer and then it takes our texts that we want to put. So we can then say rental data. Okay, and we can put a new line like that. That then becomes our content that we'll be putting within our text. We can also do the same and put an printf for a space that contains nothing but a new line or two new lines. so that whatever comes next, we've got it there. And then we can just put one record, printf, our fp, we then put what we want. So we want first element, which was the name of the property. So name of property, that, put a percentage s, then we put a new line, and then we put a comma, and then we say cr dot NOP, like that. So we are done. So what this pretty much does is it creates our file. And this file is called rental.txt. We want to use this file for writing. And then fprintf opens our file for writing to our file. fp directs us to our file. The content that is within the quotations is what we want to put within our file. And then we've got the name of the property and a variable for whatever that name was, because we would have inputted at a given point in time. So as it stands, we would have done justice. So yes, that is how we work with our file. Like I said, I don't want us to take a little bit long. I want us to do alert. I want us to learn. I want us to know that this is possible. This might be a new normal. Who knows? Maybe tomorrow someone else will create another virus which is not a corona, and we need to learn that. So we need to adjust, adapt, and also make money. Bottom line, as software developers, we're supposed to make money. And we're making money through people's prices. Someone needs a software. That is where you come. So the more you can be able to learn, the faster you can be able to learn, the better. Bottom line, the world is also changing. Why is it changing? It's changing because of software. So far, you might be shocked at some of the things that happen. You log into your Gmail or you just access something. It tells you your name, it tells you your birthday, it tells you something. For example, I don't know if some of you know. Okay, let me rephrase myself. For those of you who are now paying, right? You might find that basically what it's doing now, if you used to be a subscriber, if it's your birthday, in the month of your birthday, they give you a free subscription. Why? Because they are hoping that you does it, will not join a bit. Right? So that's a way of people trying to make money. So you as a software person, you also need to figure out how do I make money out of something. So anything can be a software, anything can be something that someone uses. And let's say, for example, right now today, farmers there in tobacco, they need to know where to sell. Someone is in Busan, someone is in Chibuku, someone is in Kaduna, someone is in Jinoi or Kabul. All those people have got tobacco, all those people need to know where to sell it. So where you come in as the developer is, how do I actually get to link people to do this? So it starts from here. So let's go back. We want to know what is going on here. So this is one of the slightly complex but not difficult to learn concepts about file. So, like we were saying, what is a file? Okay, a file is a record that is created using the console application. Okay, it has a pointer, okay, to direct you to the object file, like that. So what that then means is we are creating an object called a file. We are then directing to where that particular file is. So we can be able to open it. We can be able to see what that object is and how it works and affects our system. So we're actually creating it using our console application. Okay. At the same time, we are also saying with our file, we can be able to open it. Okay, using the extension and a read method. Or rather, let's not call it a read method, let's call it an action method. Okay, from there, we also need to have content that changes or reads or updates our file. Okay, at the same time, we also need to close the file. Okay, so what this then means now is here's what we are saying. We are saying everything that we are doing has a sequence. So, like a book, I can have my book. Let's say my book is written software engineering. I open my book, I start writing. After a certain period, I can also be able to open it and read it. After a certain period, I can also be able to open it and change certain things. So in other words, we are saying the actual process of us working with our book, writing in it, or changing certain things in our book, although we can't really edit stuff that's written, but let's assume that we can be able to edit it. Or let's assume that we're working with even our Word documents, whereby we can be able to edit and manipulate it based on what we're hoping to do. That is how we work with our files, and that is how we manipulate them to give a result based on what we are hoping to achieve. And I think we have shared enough. Are there any questions? Yes.
Okay. I want to go back to your code.
Uh-huh.
Just below kind oops. Oh yeah, that one. If open, that I just want to understand that that one you say is to open the file, right? FP is equal to F open. Then the next line says F print FP comma render data. What is the purpose of that line?
That is the line that I said. Since our F, all right, the better way of actually understanding that line, I had explained it, but maybe it was not as clear. We said printf displays output on the screen.
Yes.
Okay, so printf gives us output based on what is in the quotation. So with our fprintf, what we are saying is we want to be able to display the output, but not on the screen, but in a particular file. So the moment we put an F before the printf, we then note that we're actually working with files. So F stands for file, and then printf still means we are getting output. And then when you open the brackets, we are then saying, opening our brackets, we are then pointing to a file, which is FP. and then we want the contents that we were supposed to display in printf to be written to our file, and then we close our brackets, we put a semicolon. So those lines are then supposed to be printed in a text document. So in other words, we are then saying, if we are to create this, here's
when we lost is that we have file open, then we have the name of the file is the range of the data. Now we have a range of data. The range of data becomes what? The range of data.
Okay, let me explain using an example. Okay. And my example would be simple, or rather, I'll try and put it as simply as is possible. This is what the user will see. Okay, so let's say this is my file, or this is what I'm doing. I don't know if I can make this larger now. Okay, it's a little bit of a challenge, but let's try and have it working. Okay, let's say this is me and I am the computer. Okay, since I am the computer, here's what I'm doing. I'm going to use fprintf. So fprintf is line 80. The first line that I've got is the following: rental data. So I'm going to copy rental data. I copy it. I come to my file. I put rental data. Okay, so rental data is what I write to my file, because I've said it's a rental.txt. That's the name of my file. So I put rental data, and then there's a new line. So after typing out rental data, I press enter. Okay. I also go to the next line for fprintf. I also press enter again. I press enter again because of the new line. So that is what I'm doing. So I'm literally writing, but that is what my code is doing. I don't get to see it, but this is what my code is doing. So fprintf is actually putting rental data into my file. Yes. So from there, we then go to name of property. Okay. So name of property is what I've got, and I've got a percentage S. Okay. So since I've got my percentage S, I will paste my name of property. And then instead of having percentage S, I then put the name of property that I want to put, or I would have entered. So let's say the name of property that I've put and said the name of the property is Harare 1. Okay, that's the name of the property that I've put. So the name of property, I'm getting it from my fprintf. The percentage S, which is also linked to a variable, which is NOP, I'm also getting it as Harare 1. So that is what the user has entered. So instead of then having this, I then come to my file and I go to save as. And in my save as, I then put it as rental.txt, and I save it. Okay, so at the end of it all, I should then have a rental.txt that contains what my file has created. So in other words, I'm creating a text document using my code, and the output is a text file. So that is what each line of code is actually doing. Ameno activities.
Okay, so I will here we have name of product. I will here another line for the other one.
Yes, you need to have lines for each element that we are working, and we can see how this works. Right, so I'll end